Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Before I kick off the video of day 101 of the Russian-Ukrainian war, in all likelihood, there may be no videos for the next few days. I have to head out of town to Northern Virginia for a few days, and then I'll be back, and I'm just kind of debating on whether I should lug a laptop with me for the few days I'm going to be out there. But we'll see what happens. But just understand we may not have any production going on for until maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. But with that being said, we are continuing to see ongoing fighting, very, very heavy fighting taking place. We're really seeing a uptick in the use of Russian tactical aviation against Ukrainian forces. And we've also seen, obviously, the reported counterattack by Ukrainian forces taking place in Severodonetsk. Now, what I believe is happening in Severodonetsk is as the Russians moved further into Severodonetsk, Ukrainian forces had a lot of these areas under pre-plots for some very heavy artillery fire. And the Russian forces have not yet reduced a lot of those Ukrainian capabilities that continue to provide counter-battery and direct artillery and long-range rocketry fire against Russian forces. So as Russian forces moved in deeper into Severodonetsk, we had received reports that they had taken up to 70 to 90% of the city, and once they had gotten to a certain area, we understand that Ukrainian artillery really started to hit areas inside of Severodonetsk, and obviously there are still Ukrainian infantry units deployed in the city. And it would appear that the Russian forces backed out of some of these areas they had moved into recently, and the Ukrainians may have moved into those areas as well under the support of some of these pre-plots. Obviously, Lysychansk is kind of an overwatch into Severodonetsk, meaning the ground is a bit higher. So that gives the Ukrainians a bit of an edge over Russian forces that are continuing to move into Severodonetsk. And now that doesn't mean there's artillery directly inside of Lysychansk firing down upon Severodonetsk. In all likelihood, the artillery is some miles to the west and northwest and southwest of Lysychansk in terms of the artillery fire missions that the Ukrainians are able to deploy against Severodonetsk. But we don't anticipate that the Ukrainians will continue to hold a lot of these areas for much longer. The Russians simply just have too much firepower, too many battalion tactical groups, and just a lot of artillery. Now, again, we're starting to see quite a bit more fixed tactical air assets coming into play, attempting to find and destroy some of these Ukrainian heavy artillery units that are deployed against Russian forces in Severodonetsk. And obviously, too, the Ukrainian anti-tank weapons teams continue to operate all along the front as well, hindering some Russian maneuver elements. But that is really the news right now. We're continuing to see massive amounts of Russian firepower being poured into the entirety of the front line, really kind of running all the way now from Kherson and Mykolaiv. We received reports that Mykolaiv was hit again today, and then the amount of firepower is just really, really tremendous. There has been anecdotal reports from Ukrainian, Afghan war veterans who were in Iraq on international missions, training missions, and they stipulate this is nothing like they have ever seen in terms of the sheer intensity of the conflict. And just as the mainstream media here in the States and other foreign elements in terms of media tend to over-report the amount of Russian casualties that are being taken. And yes, the Russians, quite frankly, are taking casualties, and they really took a beating in certain areas at the start of the war. Now, some of those casualties are being mitigated by some of the ongoing tactics that the Russians are using, and now we're kind of seeing it flip-flop a bit, where the Russians again are using a lot more heavy artillery, and we're starting to see over the last 30, 60 days, we've really started to see the Ukrainians take a lot of casualties in the conflict as well. And you have these anecdotal reports from the Ukrainian servicemen at the front describing the withering fire that continues to rain down on a lot of these Ukrainian units. And then you have rear area echelons as well, in which we have seen a lot of funerals taking place really all over Ukraine and in many towns all across Ukraine that are filling up because of the casualties and some of the burial grounds, cemeteries that are starting to fill because of the ongoing war effort. So to say that the Russians are taking the preponderance of casualties or most of the casualties, it would be inaccurate because the Ukrainians are taking right now, at least, and over the course of the last several weeks, have really been taking a lot of casualties as well. And the president of Ukraine has said so much as in terms of that 50 to 100 KIA per day and up to 500 wounded. I mean, that's again a high, very very high intensity warfare that is going on right now in terms of the widespread use of heavy artillery by both sides, and throughout world history, well, at least into the modern era, World War I and beyond, artillery, the modern artillery, has always been the real killer. Very indiscriminate, very sudden, with massive amounts of it that are being used. Obviously, generates huge amounts of casualties. Now, the question is how long can the Ukrainian military continue to weather this storm of both continued tactical air attacks, cruise missile attacks, heavy artillery attacks, and the amount of casualties that are being sustained, that eventually it starts to break down. And then you could quite possibly see some fairly rapid advances by Russian forces. Now, the Ukrainians obviously are continuing to mobilize, continuing to receive Western weapons that is helping to some extent, but those Western weapons are just not being delivered at a pace and an amount that the Ukrainians really need to continue to defend themselves against this Russian onslaught. At the start of the war, yes, the Ukrainians had quite a bit of stocks of former Soviet artillery, vast amounts of munitions, but fast forward 90 days into the conflict, a lot of that equipment that the Ukrainians possessed at the start of the conflict has been destroyed or degraded by the ongoing Russian effort to strike a lot of these targets. Now, obviously, they still have quite a bit of assets. What that reduction actually looks like on the Ukrainian side, very difficult to say at this point. But we do know that the degrading is continuing, and at a certain point, we could reach that tipping point where you would see something happen with the Ukrainian army that would then allow a fairly rapid Russian advance. And I believe that is the Russian tactic and strategy at the moment in terms of its ongoing war goals and war aims. But that is about it for today. We're also looking at the probability that the HIMARS will become operational within the next 3 to 4 weeks after the Ukrainian forces continue to undergo training. Now, What we usually see is once that decision has been made to deploy the HIMAR, we will see additional HIMARs come into theater, and then it'll depend on what sort of munitions are being provided. It's very difficult to fathom that the Ukrainians would receive enough of these HIMAR munitions to really change what's happening on the battlescape right now. It's they're going to be continued to be targeted, meaning those weapon shipments by Russian forces, and it'll be very interesting to see how quickly the Ukrainians can make effective use of the HIMARS, and or if the Russians really have a kind of an idea of where they're going to be deployed at, and then they can rapidly launch missions to destroy some of those systems as they proceed west. It's also very difficult to understand how the Russians have not yet taken down the ability of the Ukrainian military to cross the Dnieper River, and that's this main body of waterway that is very, very wide in some areas, and we'll just kind of run down the entire Dnieper River as we kind of move from a south to north direction. And you would think that a lot of these crossing points would be taken out by Russian military forces, thus causing issue with the reinforcing and bringing in some of this Western equipment into the eastern area of operation, meaning the east bank of the Dnieper River. And you can see the bridges here that they have, and it's something that seems reasonable that the Russian capability would be present to take down some of these large bridges and reduce the ability of the Ukrainians to bring forces to bear on that eastern bank side. Not sure why they're doing that, and maybe it's eventually the Russians are looking past the Dnieper River and operating on the western bank at some point. I mean, they already are operating on the western bank, but I would say that the short-term goal of achieving a victory in the eastern Donbas, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, these areas at the Bakhmut, that the Russians are attempting to obtain a victory and take large amounts of territory in this area that are very, very well defended by large formations of Ukrainian forces. You would think the Russians would be limiting the ability of the Ukrainians to reinforce, resupply, and provide supply to these units on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. And I'm not sure we're seeing that as of yet, just as we have not seen the Russians strike some crucial targets in downtown Kiev, which is another, I think, a big question mark a lot of analysts have in the ongoing conflict. The Russians could have degraded some of the command and control abilities, the abilities of high-ranking Ukrainian leadership to speak to the country early in the conflict, but they chose not to do that. They could have provided a lot of pressure against key command and control elements in Kiev to drive out some of these higher-ranking leaders of the Ukrainian state without the use of a direct threat by a ground attack. They could have done this with cruise missiles and airstrikes with long-range munitions, but for some reason they've chosen not to do that as of yet, and trying to understand that. And maybe we never will, or maybe we will at some point. Who knows? Hard to say. But that's it for today. Again, heading out of town for a bit, so maybe difficult to do some content. But we'll kick back off. Worst case scenario, probably Wednesday of next week. So look, have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again soon. Have a good day.